I am Quincy Moran, aka the Q Dog, and I'm in the Moran family studio with my lovely wife, Jeannie Moran. Jeannie, please say what's up to everybody.
What's up?
Yeah, there you go. If you'd like to know more about this program, make sure that you email Quincy at mvsmpodcast.com. And also make sure you go to quincymoran.com where you can check out all the stuff that we offer. In this case, this is the apparel. So go check it out. There's a way to connect. There's a little bit about myself and our journey. You can hire me to speak, and you can look at all the brands that we are putting forward to impact culture in a positive manner. So, with that, here we are. And today we are going to talk about where do I start? And the reason we're talking about where do I start, I mean, it's birthed out of a recent standing outside the frame email, but also we're kind of connecting the dots for you, the listener, because it's one of our most downloaded show types. And in full disclosure, Jeannie and I just had a spat. So this is a great time to talk about personal responsibility and awareness because we're a bit grouchy with one another. So we will do that. Should I tell people about the program or should we get into it?
Just get into it.
Just get into it, she says. Okay. Well, with that, we're just going to get into it. So, where do I start? This is something that will help you, the listener. What's important to me is we move this program forward. And this will be the 320th episode that we've offered you. And what we want to do is make sure that what we're giving you is very practical in your ability to exercise it and follow through, but it's also very impactful because you are here for the express purpose of figuring out how to change your life and then how to enhance your relationship. So those are the two criteria that it must have. And then we've got to give you some action moving forward. So the path that we take is the path that I took when I was redefining my life and my philosophy. And it was in conjunction with Jeannie and I really deciding what we were going to do about our relationship. Were we going to remain roommates or were we going to make our relationship everything we had hoped it would be and more when we decided to get married? Fair?
Mm-hmm.
So with that, honey, I'll kind of turn it to you and give you the opportunity to speak about some of the things that you've made some notes about so that we can give them the journey here and how they can start to benefit from awareness.
Okay. I don't know how you want me to do this. I guess for us, where do you start? Starts with what do you want and why do you want it? Why don't you have it? What are you looking to change? What are you looking to improve? Is your marriage rocky because communication sucks? Are you just trying to mend broken trust? Where are you at and what is it that you want? And then you've got to know why you don't have it and what does it look like so you know what you're aiming for.
Yeah. And here's something that I like to guide people in this route when I'm coaching guys and talking to them about their life and about their relationship. I personally look, and many guys that are like me, they want to think of themselves, as a warrior on the inside, as an athlete. They want to think of themselves. I don't know. It's a manly thing to want to be not barbaric, but to be a winner. Women like to win too. I've never been a woman, so I can't tell you. So for us, I look at awareness and I say awareness is a weapon. And you can use that weapon for good to set people free, or you can use awareness as a weapon for ill. to attack yourself and other people. So it's your choice. And what does it even mean to be aware of something? Really, it's you taking some time to sit and think about the conversations that go on in your head. What what keeps playing on repeat if you just quiet yourself and listen to what's going on inside of you? And maybe you've never taken time to do that, as speaking to you, the listener. So what are your responses when people act a certain way towards you? What do you do when you're disappointed? When you think about your relationship, what's good with your relationship? And what are the things you would like to improve? That's where you'll start to develop that level of awareness, because you can look at it and say, well, shoot, I want more of this. I would like to have less of this. So what do you replace the less side with from the more side? Or maybe there's something that you're missing in your relationship as a whole because of some things that have gone on. And so here is the thing. When it comes to controlling Jeannie, and this is what I have the power to do. When it comes to controlling her actions, her thoughts, her attitude, her overall human experience, I control. How much of that would you say, honey, I control? Is it 0 or less than 0? It's probably 0.
Pretty much.
It's 0. So what do you have to do? You have to start to become aware of the things that you are doing, the habits, the attitudes, and the actions that you are taking that are contributing to where your relationship is. That is, you got to take responsibility for that. I have to take responsibility for what I'm doing. So one of the biggest questions we like to ask is, what does that look like? So here's what awareness looks like to me, and what drove this experience within my life. I am a very hot-tempered individual, very emotional human being. And when you put me and other family members, like blood relatives, around each other, we're all wired pretty much the same way. And so I noticed around this particular family member that we could argue about what shade of blue the sky is, or what shade of green the grass is. We could argue about the shape of a tire. And those are silly examples, but we could argue just to argue. And I did not like the emotional response that caused in me. So I wanted to be less explosive, because like my personality, I could be hot-tempered, blow up, like full-on explosion, and then 10 seconds later, I was good and happy and go lucky again. And so my goal was to say, I want to be the gatekeeper of my emotions, my emotional intelligence. And so I started to endeavor how to do that. And I felt like that my inability to control my emotions, especially the negative ones, were impacting all of my relationships, not just my marriage, which is the most important relationship I have on earth, but also with my family members, with my friends, and as a professional. And so what you want to do is you want to become aware of what is driving your character, what is driving your emotional response, because that's going to allow you to take a step back and look at yourself and say, what's the root cause of this issue? What is really going on here? And so that's what I had to do. And it really helped me because I went through the funeral experience, and which is something that I'm gonna break down deeper for you in another show. But ultimately, it's like, well, what do I want the people that I love and care about? What would I want them to say on me the day of my funeral? And then I had to look, like, you go to the future, you come back to the present, say, hey, are my actions, do they have me on the path to become who that is I want to be? And the fact is that I was not. And so it is these situations where you need to become aware of what is going on inside of you. And some of it has to do with emotions. Some of it has to do with fear. I mean, there's one more example before I have Jeannie get into, what her situation is. I had some awareness about me. It's a very practical application here. So I grew up pretty darn poor. That's just a fact. And we didn't really get to go to the movies much when I was living in Alabama. It was a different experience in California. But in my older years, if we got to go to the movies, I was just happy to be at the movies and really didn't get the stuff that goes along with the movies. And so when Jeannie would go to the movies, she is having an experience. Like, you get popcorn, you get drinks. You don't go just to be glad you got to go to the movies. You go because you're creating an experience and you're having a really good time doing it. And I would get really frustrated. Like when we went to see The Passion of the Christ, I was offended because Jeannie got popcorn. I'm like, how could you get popcorn at a time like this? But also outside of that, when we would have the money to go to the movies and she would get all these other things, I'm like, I would get offended because it's like, why can't you just be happy that we're at the movies? And not only do that about the movies, but I did that about Christmas and other areas in my life where I had a limiting belief because of my upbringing that it's like, you just need to be happy that you have this, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you're creating traditions within your family and things that life is so short, you want to have positive experiences with your family. You want to create memories and enjoy things together. I had to stop and think about that and go, I don't like my mindset about this as much as I like yours. So I had to become aware of that and go, where the heck did this come from? Where does this attitude come from in me? And so that has happened to me many, many times. Obviously, I'm a human being, so I'm not running at like 100% accuracy and capacity. I still have issues. I still make mistakes. I still lose my cool from time to time. It happens. I'm a human being. But overall, now, I would say rather than being 40-60 to the negative split, I'm probably closer to 80-20, maybe a little bit higher, to the positive. And that's what you want to make is progress, because you will start to identify the things that are going on in your life by your actions. You will start to understand that many of the things that you are doing, you're operating out of fear, you're operating out of resentment, you're operating out of disappointment, and it'll be hard for you to take a positive from an opportunity when you get disappointed, because it tends to feel so familiar that it's like, here we go again. So with that, I know that you have some examples that you were going to talk about, honey.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I'm going to give you the floor and you can talk about your examples, and then we'll come back together and talk about one of the exercises you can do to figure it out. So the floor is yours, my dear.
So part of this for me came from listener email and then going back through what I did with my coach when we were going through things. And I was I was there for myself, but then when we got into the marriage side of things, I was heavily leaning into what you didn't do or what was lacking there, or the things that were upsetting me about how our marriage went. And a lot of it stemmed from, we had a lot of kids. Quincy was gone a lot. I took that as he didn't want to be home. He didn't want to be around us. That wasn't necessarily the case, but that's how I saw it. And so I was pissed because I'm doing the laundry, I'm cooking the food, I'm trying to keep up with the house with little people. And if you've tried to do that, it's not easy. Our house probably looked like a bomb went off more often than not. And I was surrounded by little people and their attitudes and their learning and testing and all those things that they were doing at those ages. And when you have multiple of them going through attitude changes at the same time, even when they're small, it's not easy to navigate and not lose your cool. um, but what came out when it was my turn to figure out my side of things, my coach said, okay, but what's your responsibility in this? I got mad because I'm not responsible for what you do. I'm not responsible for how you respond. I'm not responsible for how you react. But then she backed it up and had me play out, what does it look like when Quincy comes home at night? He's out, he works all day. What happens when he gets home? The kids usually race to get to him to see who gets to take his shoes and socks off because it became a game. I usually give him the rundown of the day, what's going on. We get ready for supper. And then, we go on about our evening. And she's like, okay, well, what's your rundown of the day? And I started telling her, this kid did that. This kid did that. This is what was going on. I mean, that was my life, was 5 little people at the time. Well, 7 at the time because Anissa was in my belly. Just that was it. There were 7 little kids and they were all doing different things, and none of it was necessarily horribly bad. But when you compound it by 7 people, it's really irritating real fast, especially when you have no adult outlet, you have no breather, you don't get to, I mean, I couldn't go to the bathroom. If I went to the bathroom, I had a child sitting in the doorway talking to me while I was going to the bathroom. It was just, I didn't have any time alone. And so she pulled it back and said, okay, what could you do different? What do you mean, what can I do different? Well, he's getting upset. He's getting frustrated. He's getting snappy with you because when he comes home through the front door, what's the first thing that happens? You offload all of your crap. There's no, hey, honey, welcome home. There's no, how was your day? There's no, give him a few minutes to go decompress, to get out of his work mode. There's none of that. It is just, okay, you're home. I'm off. This is what you need to know. And I'm done. I'm checking out for the evening. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing. It had just become, I need a breather. And the minute another person came through the door, whoever it was, you're up, I'm out. And so we had to go through my own awareness of, it was because of what I was doing and how I was approaching you coming home.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at it as an escape, whereas you were looking at it as coming home to the kids and a great time and having a good evening with your family. And I was just offloading everything and done. And so it came down to, or I would, as soon as he would get home, I would tell him, okay, we don't have this, or that. We need to figure out what we're going to do about paying this, and this. Like, it was an immediate dump, basically. And those things always tended to emphasize for Quincy the things that he was lacking, the things that he wasn't doing enough of. It played on his internal dialogue, which then created issues between the two of us because now you're not feeling too great. I'm not feeling too great. Chances are we're arguing about it because can I just get home and not have to deal with yuck? And so we would go round and round and round. And Rita brought it to light that if I changed how I approached you coming home, I could still tell you about the things the kids did. I could still tell you about the worries or the things that we were lacking that we needed to deal with, but not when you first walked through the door, because that set the tone for the whole evening.
Yeah.
And so I had to realize that I could prevent the argument. I could prevent some of the chaos and the stress if I would approach things differently and allow you to come home and decompress for a few minutes, which in turn turned into me getting to have at least a half hour to an hour to go take a bath and relax and, get out of my head and get my escape that I needed without the conflict in between. So it's what it boiled down to for my side of things was Rita pointing out the things that we're lacking in our marriage, the things that are difficult in our marriage. What part do I play in it? What am I doing or not doing that's contributing to what's going on? And it came about to, when we learned the love languages, and when it came down to knowing that you needed words of affirmation, it was one of those things that she brought to light. Well, when you remind him or you scold him that this bill is due or this got cut off or the pantry's bare or whatever it is, and you're not talking to him, you're just telling him these things are not working, these things are lacking, and you need to help me figure it out. It's like you just threw everything in his lap and threw responsibility on him that he already had. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was no secret that you guys are behind on bills or that you're lacking in money or that we need to go grocery shopping. Like, he lives in the same house. And she's like, but because you were already battling with your own internal dialogue on trying to find a way to make extra money, all these things were pulling you away from the house, trying to make a mark that was going to make a financial impact. And I was just dumping on top of it. So we worked on changing how I said things, changing how I worded things so that I wasn't adding fuel to your own internal fire. I was instead adding water to it to put it out and adding fuel to a different fire, which was to start building you up. And, the instead of just telling you, well, this isn't working, coming at it from a different angle and saying, okay, what do you think we can do about this? Where do you think we stand in this? How do I help you figure this out? Instead of just saying you need to do it. So it was more about learning how I responded to things and how I reacted to things. And then that started playing into my own kind of paying more attention to how I talk to other people and what their responses are and how they did things. Our kids in particular, because we had one at the time that was very volatile. And the two of us would just clash hard. We still do. But now I have more control over how I react or respond to it versus going toe to toe with a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But it also changed how we said things. So there was a way to diffuse the argument. I was no longer arguing to be right. I wasn't even arguing. If it came down to going back and forth, it's okay. You can be right. You're going to be alone, but you can be right.
Well,
So
let me jump in there real quick because I think there's a lot of meat on the bone for us to talk about when it comes to awareness, because you needed the opportunity to offload. And so we just really didn't know what the format would look like. And so when I would come home and get the rundown of what everybody, number one, I think for the most part, guys are fix-it machines. They just want to fix crap.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would come home and you would give me the rundown, like everybody would be excited to see me in the beginning, but you give me the rundown of what everybody did, then I would ultimately just get into disciplinary mode. And so it went from, yay, dad's home to, you, and so you might feel better in the moment, but ultimately it kind of soiled the whole like temperature of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have the skill set at the time. I had not developed it to know when you needed some time to pour out what had you so anxious and worried, like where you're operating out of anxiety and fear. I don't have to participate in that. And I didn't know that. So then I would go into another mode when you would start to talk about the things that are not going well at home and how we don't have any food or we don't have whatever we don't have. Because when I would hear you saying we don't have all this, like you said, it would, the way I took it is, hey man, what you're doing is not enough. You're not enough to provide for this family. You're not doing enough. So then I would figure out like, okay, with my skill set, what can I do that's going to bring in more money? What can I do that's going to fill the cabinets? And so that prompted me to go find more work to do, which in turn made you feel like I didn't want to be home when that was not the case. But I didn't know at the time that it wasn't my responsibility to participate in your anxiety and fear. I was more of a place where you could let that out. And when you let it out, you would at least feel better because it's not all pent up
Mm-hmm.
inside of you. And in turn, you don't have to participate in mine. If there's a fire in the house, we better participate in each other's anxiety to get everybody out safely. But otherwise, we need to understand what it means to be a sounding board and then ask the right questions. And that was game changer for us. So what we did after we became aware of what we were doing or not doing as I would come home is we became aware that Jeannie needed a break. And then when I came home from work, because I was an operations manager at the time, all I did was fix and handle problems all day long. So I would, if you want me to come home and be in work mode, tell me all the problems and I'm going to get to fixing them. And in the interim, I'm going to make it seem like this is so simple. Why don't you just fix it yourself? This is what I would do. And we're two different people.
Mm-hmm.
So I would set it up and say, okay, from now on, this is the way things are going to be. Then I go to work and then you're there. And it's like, this isn't even your plan.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned a lot from that. And what we learned from it is we needed to create, which you're great at, we needed to create an experience when dad comes home. And number one, mommy needed to feel like she was a priority. So when daddy comes home, she gets the first kiss, no matter what. Nobody else is getting the first kiss, which created a competition
To try and get the first kiss.
that was fun for all the kids, which they still compete
Some
for
of
the
them
first
do,
hug,
yeah.
the first kiss when I get home. And sometimes I'll be so distracted that they sucker me into it and they win. Sometimes they do it against my will. But what would happen is I would get at least 10 minutes to go in the room and to get out of my work clothes and get into my civilian clothes. I wasn't in the military, and that would give me a chance just to go, okay, I'm not at work anymore. I'm not an operations manager. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. Let me decompress for a moment. And then I can go out there and we can have fun. If there's discipline, I'm good with doing the discipline. But first, let's have fun because that's what I like to do. And in turn, when I get my 10 minutes to decompress, then I would send Jeannie off to the bath because she needed some time to herself. She needed some privacy. She needed a chance to get out of mom mode and get into a bath and do her own decompression from the day. And then we could begin our times together. And I'm really big at training everybody that's in my vicinity. So it helped us train, teach the kids in a better way. And then if there was like, we would get around our table or around the bar and everybody would get their say. And then if there were some things that were not good, we would handle it publicly and talk about what was going on. So that was a hard bit of awareness. And Coach Rita is world class at asking questions that make you unhappy in the beginning, but can lead to happiness in the end. Um, I guess it could be better said that Coach Rita is good at asking you questions that might make you mad.
Yeah, but she does it on if it makes you mad, it's because she has a point, and you're pissed because she just exposed something that you don't want to take responsibility for. It's like, well, what did you do in this situation? What was your lacking moment? Could you have responded in a different way? And then when you start thinking about stuff, you're like, yeah, but damn it, I was mad. I didn't want to respond in a different way. She's like, well, there you have it. You didn't want to respond in a different way when you could have chosen to respond in a different way, and it would have had a very different outcome. And it used to irritate the crap out of me, but it taught me who I was and what I was doing, and I have a choice. Now that I'm aware that this is what I'm doing, I now have a choice. And the responsibility falls solely to me. I can't say, well, he said this and it pissed me off. Like, it gives me the right to do whatever it was that I was going to do. No, there is no right. There is make a choice. There is a choice. There is no right. I can choose to respond or I can choose to react. Which one do I want to do? And the third option is I can choose to do nothing and see what happens. But she would do that on purpose. And the more aware she made me of how I said things, how you like putting the two of us together in the counseling meeting and having her say, I would say something to her and she would stop and say, okay, hold on, Quincy, are you hearing what she's saying? What did she say? And then Quincy would feed it back and Rita would say, okay, but are you understanding what's happening? What emotion she's coming out of? What's going on? She put us in a position where not only were we aware of ourselves, we were aware of each other. I was aware of what you needed when you came in the house. I can tell you what I need to tell you. I can offload, but I need to give you this time to do XYZ. And once that time is done and we come back together, and usually after we had the conversation, it was he would come home, we would go through his routine. He would go off, change his clothes, decompress, whatever, come out and hang out with the kids. I would go take my bath, relax, come back. And then when we got to dinner, it was a round table discussion of everything everybody did during the day. And if it was good, bad, or ugly, it was all brought to the table.
Yep.
And then that's when we dealt with it because it was no longer my responsibility. It was no longer Quincy's responsibility. It was now a family discussion. And everybody got to say, well, she did this or this is what happened. And then the kids, it helped us teach the kids how to make that choice.
Yeah, it helped us in building our family culture. And that's the other thing that I think you made the perfect point. When you sit in front of a third party that has good intentions, and they help you understand the gaps in your communication. Because, like Jeannie said, she would say XYZ, Coach Rita would pause and say, Quincy, what do you think about that? And I would say, here's what I'm hearing. And there would be times where Jeannie's like, that's not what I said. And Coach Rita's like, either yes, it is, or no, it's not. And so she would teach us about the gaps in our communication or our ability to communicate with one another, because like one of the principles she taught, it's not what you say, it's what they hear you say.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very important for us too. But I think the other part that you made a great point is right now you are operating on a default or a habit mode. You're just doing what you do because it is what you do. Right, wrong, or indifferent, good, bad, or ugly. You're just doing what you do. And so once you become aware of something, now you have the option to continue in your poor habits, or you have the option to become intentional because now it is about a choice.
Well, and here's the other side of that. If you continue doing what you're doing, knowing what you now know, and I loved this and hated it at the time, Rita said, "You've lost your right to bitch." If you know that you have a part to play in this, and you know that this is the choice that you made, and that's the reaction you got, you have no room to complain. None. Because you made the choice to feed into whatever that was. You made the choice to say what you said. You made the choice to ignore whatever it was. Your choice can either help you fix a situation
Mm-hmm.
or it removes your right to complain. And so many people get pissed when you tell them you don't have a right to complain. It's to put it in a simple term that a lot of people will use, and it's probably going to rub people the wrong way. But if you didn't vote, shut up.
That's what came to mind when
You
when
know, I
you
mean,
said
my
it.
dad used to tell me all the time when I was a kid, when people would complain about things, he would first thing he would ask them, they'd complain about prices of this or prices of that. My dad said, "You have a job?" "No." "Shut up." And they would get so mad. And he's like, "You're living off of somebody else's help. And you're not doing," and I'm not saying people who like actually need help and can't work. He was talking to people who were just being buttheads and not working. They're being lazy.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
I met the people, so I know he's talking about. We were involved in a lot of different groups. But anyway, my dad would just tell him, if you're not getting up to get yourself a job and get off of that program so that you can take care of yourself instead of living off of what I'm putting into the system, you don't have a right to say, well, the prices are so high and it's this and this and this. But you're not helping the situation. You're taking from everybody else. So it's, and you can do the same thing with people with voting. If you voted this way or that way, or if you didn't vote, you don't have a right to say anything. It's the same thing in your marriage. If you're complaining about, let me put it this way: if you're coming to Quincy and I, and you're saying my spouse, my spouse, my spouse, my spouse, my spouse, and then we flip the table and say, okay, well, what are you doing? 9 times out of 10, you get the, well, what do you mean? There's two people in a marriage, and I can't help the other person without the other person being present and having the conversation with me. You're the one that came here. You're the one who's talking to us. You're the one who wants the change and the difference. So you're the one I'm going to work with. Well, but my spouse is doing this, this, and this. I completely understand that. However, I cannot address that. And neither can you, because you're not responsible for what they do. You're responsible for what you do or don't do. So, what is your part in this? What are we trying to get to the root of so that we can work on fixing your situation, making you a better person, which then impacts everything else in the scenario? Because if you change what you're doing, you recognize now, I talk down to my spouse. I call them stupid. I call them dumb. I make them feel like they don't matter, or they're always saying that I do this, this, and this. And let's say that's it. The way you talk to them makes them feel like they're stupid. Okay. Do you? Well, no, that's not what I mean. But sometimes they just, but do you? If they're telling you what you're saying and how you're responding is making them feel this way, what is your responsibility in that? Well, I call everybody stupid. I don't care who you call stupid. That particular person, who is supposed to be the most important person in your life, does not like that. So what is your responsibility in the situation? You have a choice now. You now know that something you're doing has this effect. You no longer have the right to say, well, but. You no longer have the right to say it's their fault. You are now aware of it. It is your responsibility to make a decision. Am I going to continue doing this thing, or am I going to change it and try to do it differently to see if I can't get a different response? Once you're aware of what you're doing, now we have something to work with. Because if you're constantly throwing out, Rita did it to me a lot. She's like, I got mad and I would reference Quincy being similar to my dad. My dad had a certain way of doing things, and it used to just irritate the hell out of me. Still does. I love the guy, but he's still my dad and he's always going to act like he's my dad. But every now and then he would do something and it was just like the stomping of the foot where it's my rules, my house, my this, my that, and you can't rebut against that as a kid. But as an adult, I mean, I could leave. I can just walk out the front door and I'm no longer standing in your house and I can do what I want to do. But what does that cause? Is it something that I'm willing to battle that for? And when it came up with Quincy and I in a conversation in an argument, Rita was like, look at him. Okay. Who do you see? Quincy. Is that your dad? No. Then why are you treating him like he's your dad? Why are you acting with him the way you would with your dad? You're contending with him over something that it's really not a contention. You could have very simply said, I don't like how you said that. I don't like the tone that came out in, as opposed to, telling him, you're acting like my dad and you're not my dad. So no, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do. Essentially, you're asking like a petulant teenager.
Mhm.
Those types of things, we don't realize it until somebody else or something happens to enlighten us of, oh crap, I do that. Okay, now what do I do? So we went through a series of questions to kind of, I don't know everybody's situation. So these were some of the questions that Rita came up with. Some of the questions are what Quincy and I have talked about. When you argue, do you have to be right? Is that something that you do, that you just have to be right? You have to get the last word in because you are not willing to bend to somebody else's ideas or opinions, whether they're right or wrong. The whole premise is you can fight to be right, and you might be right. But if you continue arguing it, you're going to be right by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because other people are not going to want to be around you. And that's not just your spouse, that's anybody. If you're a manager and you're just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, even though, God forbid, you might actually not be right, there are ways to do that without having to be a butthead about it. How do you speak to your spouse or to others? Are you condescending when you speak? Are you rough about it? I am very blunt. I make no bones about it. And if people don't want me to be blunt or they tell me ahead of time, I don't do well with aggression. Okay, cool. I'll back it down. But if I don't know that, I don't respond. But once I do know that, I now have a choice. And it's not, well, that's just the way I am. Not if I want to talk to this person, it's not. If they need me to shift gears, if I'm talking to my 5-year-old daughter versus my 29-year-old husband, there is a difference in how I speak to these two people.
Mm-hmm.
Tone matters. But if I don't know those things and I just say, well, it's just the way I am. Okay, well, then you're acknowledging the fact that you are unwilling to bend. Do you know or meet your spouse's needs? Do you know what their love language is? Are you actually intentionally making an effort to meet those things, or are you giving them what you need? If I know Quincy needs physical touch and I'm not holding his hand, or I'm not, because it's not just sex. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. It's not just sex. Physical touch is everything from holding hands to hugging to sitting together on the couch and your knees touching. It is exactly that. It is a physical form of touch. It doesn't have to mean ownership. It is just a simple acknowledgement, a physical acknowledgement that you're there with them. That's all that is. And a lot of people, I think, take that to mean it's just the sex in a relationship. It's so much more than that.
Yep.
Do you listen intentionally, or do you only listen to the parts that you want to hear while you collect ammunition? Think about it. In an argument, even in a discussion, do you sit and listen to your spouse talk and intentionally stop your internal dialogue, intentionally lay aside your own emotions, take yourself out of the situation, and listen? Or are you listening to everything that they're saying? And when they say, well, when you do, and automatically you start pulling up ammunition. Well, yeah, when I do this, but what about when you do this? So as soon as you get a break in the conversation, you're throwing it back. Which one is it?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you're asking yourself these questions to find what part do you play in what's broken? What part do you play in what's lacking? What part do you play in what it is that you're trying to build? Are
Correct.
you the encourager? Are you the one who is um, constantly trying to reinvent date night? Are you the one who's putting in the extra effort? Okay, cool. As long as you're aware of those things, good, bad, or ugly, you've got to be aware of what part you're playing.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a few things that we'll say in closing here. Um, remember this phrase, write it down somewhere. Okay. Strength overextended becomes a weakness. We're going to teach you how to take personal responsibility, but you can't take all the responsibility. So just know that, because at some point, some people like myself or others like me will go too far. And then everything that goes wrong, you tend to personalize, like, how could I have made this? How could I have avoided this, etc. But right now it's really important for you to come to terms with what part you play. And there's two words I want to leave you with on that side of it when it comes to awareness, because Jeannie is absolutely correct. Once you're aware of something, you now have a choice. And your choice will either help your situation or it will hinder your progress. So, what what do you need to know when it comes to helping or hindering your progress and making a choice? You need to know this: because you make a different choice once, it doesn't mean everything is going to be okay.
It's called a progress for a reason.
Because you make the right choices for one day doesn't mean that your spouse is going to magically change. Because you may be like me in the past and started a diet for it to last 2 weeks, and then you jump off the wagon and things go back to the way they were. And so I say the word diet because it's something we're all familiar with. But when you start to change your actions, both you and everybody else has already seen this from you. So you have to maintain making the right choices day in and day out, even when you don't see change.
And you're going to slip up. Expect it. I mean, we've been doing this for 15 years. We still have slip ups. We still have, obviously, we still have arguments. We still have communication issues here and there because we forget in the heat of the moment, or we're busy and preoccupied with something else, and we will revert to something that is familiar because we weren't intentionally paying attention to the situation or what it required. It's going to happen. So it's not something that you're just going to change overnight. And it's not something that's just going to automatically stay 100% on point. It is an effort you have to consciously make all the time.
And it makes a world of difference in your
It
relationship.
does.
I mean, it's game changer.
It does for you too, because you don't feel so beat down when stuff happens because now you understand what your responsibility is in it.
Yep. And so the more you do it, the better you get at it. Like Jeannie said, you know, just because Tom Brady was probably arguably the best quarterback of all time, doesn't mean he didn't miss a pass every once in a while. But I would say he probably got more right than he got wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and those add up. So know that. Here's the final piece of this, and then we're going to wrap it up. The other part of awareness that's very key, like it's crucial, it's critical, is to know what baggage you have brought into this relationship and start to identify where you're holding yourself or your spouse hostage for the actions of other people. That is extremely important. We've done some episodes on baggage. We should probably do another one.
We'll get back into that again as we go through this series, because it's not just about what you brought into the marriage or how you respond to your spouse based on your baggage, but it also you identify now that you're aware you do things. Now you can identify why you
Mhm.
do things, because at this point in my life, this happened, and now I'm using that lens, so to speak, to judge everything in that type of situation. I always revert back to whatever fear you felt in that situation, or whatever your not to go too deep in it, but your body and your mind both have muscle memory, and they react to things that are familiar. And if it's something that you were fearful of and you come up against it later on in life, you have that same response because your body remembers, that memory triggers that response, and now you've got something that's familiar that has reset that response. Now that you know that, though, again, you're aware. What do you choose? How do you respond? So there's more to it. I'm sure we'll do another round on what baggage do you bring.
I want to put something in here. Like Jeannie says that, you will remember, like your body remembers. So there's a concept, or some people call it a hypothesis, but it's called cellular memory. And I tend to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And cellular memory is the ability of cells to retain a record of how they change as they develop from an embryo to an adult. And what does that mean even deeper? That means that memories can be stored outside of the brain and in all of your cells. So the idea that non-brain tissue can have memories, is it's very a very interesting concept. And Dr. Caroline Leaf brings it into the function of, how does your body know how to respond when you have a cold? Because the code is built in your cells. And to go a step deeper, there are things in your brain called dendrites. They look like trees. They are built. They are physical manifestations of your experiences. This is not supernatural. This is scientific things that
Mm-hmm.
they can judge. So, what happens when you become aware of something? You'll start to see how you are building these dendrites or your cellular memory. You will. Because when you get disappointed and something feels familiar, you go down a path
Mm-hmm.
and you start to act the way you have always acted. And now you have the ability to say, I want to change that. And that's the techniques that we're here to give you. This is how we have changed our life. So, the baggage concept is very important for us to understand, because not only did you bring it into your relationship, but you are actively pulling from the baggage to live your daily life. So, there's there it is. That's our episode on awareness. And I figured we'd get a good 30 minutes in. We're at 54. So I think we gave you more. You got bonuses today. You got more than you bargained for. So we're not even going to charge you any extra.
Mm.
So that's good news. So with that, don't forget, I want to make sure that you remember, if we've helped you in any way at any point on any episode, it would be very helpful for us for you to go out and help us spread the good news of man versus marriage, because this is part of our personal gospel. It's our experience. And that is helping you redefine your path and answer the question, how good do you want your life and your marriage to be? Because you have the opportunity to do that. So when you go to quincymoran.com/apparel, you'll see our flagship Man versus Marriage, the podcast shirt. And I'm telling you, everybody's reading you. You are a billboard. So this helps us gain awareness. Every time we travel, we're wearing our Man versus Marriage stuff. And for the first time ever, Gene and I were in an airport, and somebody came up to us and said, "Hey, I know about your podcast." And it was the CEO of a large company, which I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. And then you can also look at this one, which says, not born ready, built ready. And that is what it takes. You are not born ready for these things. You have to be built into a house that's ready. Our flagship Family Famous, That's right. That's what we're teaching you. And I'm telling you, you are going to love what we're coming forward with in 2025. And then there is the notorious Hustle Mania, QuincyMoran.com. So check that stuff out. If you want to know more about the guide to a great marriage, email us, Quincy at mvsmpodcast.com, because when that series drops, you're going to get a guide that you can download and use in your relationship, and it is going to make a difference. And I am excited for you to get it. So make sure you check that out. Any final thoughts, honey?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. She is Jeannie Moran. I am Quincy Moran, and this is Man versus Marriage, the podcast.